Hello and welcome back to another video. Today here again on Forza Horizon 5 to take another look at the Lotus Emira, which was recently added as part of a new paid car pack here in Forza Horizon 5. This time though, I'm going to be trying it with a 4-cylinder engine instead of the 6-cylinder engine that it comes with from standard. To do this, I'm actually going to be purchasing a third Emira. I already have a stock one and an A-class tuned one with the engine. So let's buy another one here. Those are green and yellow, so I think this one we'll just get from here, which means it'll be in the default blue. So here we are then, straight away in the upgrade shop. I'm not going to be giving any overview or looking at the paint options for this car, because I already covered all of that in the previous video. Do go and check that one out if you want to see a sort of more background overview of this car with its default 6-cylinder engine and with a tune applied. What I did say though in that video was that in reality it's available with two engines, 6-cylinder Toyota engine and a 4-cylinder AMG engine. And when I was going through the engines here, I went past a 2-litre inline 4, and it didn't occur to me to add 2 and 2 together to figure out that this 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo engine is the AMG engine, which is a really, really cool detail, and I love that they've done this. It does, of course, drop our power immediately by 45. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll see what it's like to drive just like that, I guess, first. Of course, the first thing you notice is it sounds rather different to the 6-cylinder. Turbocharged rather than supercharged, so yeah, it doesn't have that nice supercharger whine, although turbos are spooling now. That sounds pretty good. It almost sounds like a miniature V8. I mean, I suppose it's a 4-cylinder. It's kind of more rumbly than the other one. The other one's more screamy. That turbo spool noise, though, is incredible. And although it's slower, it doesn't feel much slower, I'll be honest. So I can kind of see why people go for that. Obviously, if I was going to have a Lotus Emira, I would have a 6-cylinder Toyota engine and a manual gearbox, but I kind of understand this option. It means it's more available to more people, it's more economical, more dailyable, even though it's kind of not. But I do kind of understand why that's been an option. Although, let's be honest, if you're going for a Lotus, you're not exactly going for the sensible choice. So you might as well have the bigger, faster engine, with 400 horsepower instead of 355. Anyway, here in Forza it feels much the same standard. It's only, like we found when we put the engine in, it's only a 45 horsepower deficit, so... What I didn't look at, though, was the other stats. Ignore the yellow one above, that's my modified one for online racing from last time that was green in the video, confusingly. But yeah, it's under a 2-litre engine, whereas this is 3.5, essentially. It's 760, so we've only dropped 7 PI. We've dropped 45 horsepower, like I said, but we have also dropped 10 kilos. I know it's still substantially heavier than older Lotuses, for example, but yeah, there's a slight weight reduction. So all in all, Forza reckons they're pretty similar. So, well, I think we should see if anyone's made any tunes using this engine, see if it's any good, basically. Unfortunately, with the downloaded tunes, it's almost impossible to tell what engine it's using, and I think most of the purist ones out there are using the stock engine, because that's kind of what you're supposed to do for purist, but technically speaking, this is a stock engine, it's just not the default one in Forza. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to do something which is never a good idea, and make my own tune. Okay, so this is what I've ended up with. It's probably not perfect, but I essentially went for the same dirt tyres that was on the other tune on my other one, and tried to reduce the weight as much as possible. It's 20 horsepower lower than that. It's also slightly lighter, but I did struggle to balance getting certain things in. So it's on a stock gearbox, which I'm slightly worried about, and stock clutch. It should be okay because it's quite a modern car. But yeah, not perfect. It's got 430 horsepower and weighs 1,165 kilos. But like I say, the tune with the V6 was 460 horsepower. It's actually 30 horsepower more. But I think was 1,180 kilos roundabouts. So it's a little bit lighter, but a little bit down on power, and of course has a smaller engine. Other than that, I'm hoping this is going to be fairly similar to that tune, except for the fact that I built it. I had some time to test this car before we got into the first race, and felt that the back was a little bit more slippery than the other tune, although I thought at the time that was just down to some more experienced tuning on that car over mine, which it probably still is, although I found the issue slightly worse once we were racing. So I joined mid-adventure, firstly racing at the Estadio circuit, which confirmed what I thought about this car's handling now that it had my tune on it. Especially at lower speeds, it was quite a lot more slippy than the other tune, and at high speeds seemed to almost understeer, which was a bit weird. So not quite sure what I've done to it, other than not really doing much tuning after I applied the upgrades, because I don't really know what I'm doing. Anyway, the final race was a sprint where the car just felt a little too unstable, especially through the high-speed corners, and slightly lacking in power compared to the V6 tune that I used before. I therefore struggled to keep up with a few of the leading cars, and that was kind of that. As it wasn't a full set of races though, I did do another set, starting again at the Estadio circuit, and this time driving a lot better than previously. I do absolutely love this track once I kind of get used to it, and having had a go with this car around there already, I was much more confident in it, and I spent much of the race chasing down an F40, which I think I was actually slowly gaining on, which is probably why I pushed so hard on the final lap, which inevitably ended in me missing a checkpoint through that chicane, at which point I lost another place to an older Lotus. So yeah, should have been second but ended up finishing third around there. Next up was another sprint race, which was a similar story, chasing a Ferrari. This time, though, that was definitely pulling away from me. I wasn't gaining on him, so I didn't push quite so hard because I knew it was pulling away. But I did get quite a convincing second place, with third quite a long way behind. Finally, it was on to the Playa Azul circuit, where I was brutally murdered by a tank pool, and then brutally murdered by an S2000, who I did eventually get past, and had some laps running in clean air towards the end there. But yeah, not a great end to that adventure. So although not winning anything, I got a few podiums there, so overall this tune does seem not too bad, or better than I thought it might be, despite the fact that I made it. It is, however, nowhere near the V6 engined one with the K1Z Bala tune on it that I used in the first kind of review video of this car, which is maybe unsurprising. For reference, around Playa Azul, that tune previously managed a low 108, and the one that I've made for this car only managed a 109.1, so it's around a second slower, which is basically eternity in racing terms. Having said that, I don't think even with a better tune, with somebody who knows what they're doing, fine-tuning it, that this engine would ever be as fast as the other. It might be closer to it than I've got it, but I don't think it's ever going to beat that. Because although it's slightly lighter, it's not by very much, and it lacks 30 horsepower over the other one. And given the choice, I think most people buying a Lotus would prefer a V6 engine anyway. And same goes for in the game. Surely you want a V6 Lotus rather than a four-cylinder Lotus. So even if the other one was only a little bit slower, you would want this engine. It's the one to have in this to make it a fun sports car. So even if the smaller engine was only a tiny bit slower, I wouldn't use it anyway, if that makes sense. It would have to actually be faster than this V6 one to make me want to put that engine in more permanently. Anyway, I will keep a four-cylinder one, but I'll probably convert it back to the stock four-cylinder one because it's not that great for racing. So although this engine swap is a cool, realistic option to have, in practice is actually rather useless. I'll leave it with the stock four-cylinder one in my garage for now, just because it's kind of an interesting thing to have. But if my garage gets full, I might have to throw it away, I think. Because I don't really need 3 Emiras, and the racing one and the stock V6 one that I previously had, I prefer to this one, given this one isn't as good. Because that V6 Ballard-tuned one was winning every race I took it into, basically, so I think I'm going to go back to using that for A-Class racing. And that is going to do it for a very second look at the Lotus Emira, this time with the 4-cylinder engine fitted, with that engine stock, and with me attempting to make an A-Class tune out of it. And yeah, it's not slow, but it's not that close to the other one, mostly because I tuned it, but I don't think any way round it's going to be as fast, and it's not the engine that I like as much. I'd much prefer the V6. So, whilst it is an option, don't do it, because the other engine is just better and faster and more interesting and more fun to drive. But there we go. It is rather cool that another manufacturer stock engine is available for this, so I kind of hope they do that with more cars, because it's a fun thing to do, even if in this case it turns out to not actually be as good. But anyway, that is going to do it for a very first look at this car with that engine fitted. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back with the next video very soon.